Good morning. I'm Laurent Meillet-Contoz. I'm working with ST Microelectronics in Grenoble, France. And my talk today is about virtual twins, modeling trends and challenges ahead. In this presentation, I will discuss various flavors of digital twins. I will step back a little and review the evolution of the modeling trends over the last decade. Then I will illustrate the digital twin concept on two examples. I will discuss the upcoming challenges we are facing from the modeling side before the conclusion of the talk. There are actually various flavors of digital twins. Considering the system of systems, a digital twin is a model of a product, a production line, as well as a model of the manufacturing process. Going deeper into the analysis, a system is modeled with the system architecture and the interaction between the system components. And diving further at the SoC level, a model of the system on chip is composed of a model of the SoC architecture as well as the interactions between the hardware and software parts of the system. Let's step back a little and consider the evolution of the design flow. We start from a specification and we want to build a system that has a certain functionality but that also implements safety and security features under a certain level of performance. In the past, the design flow was very sequential, starting from the hardware design and then following up with the software design, moving eventually with the hardware-software integration and validation. The most time-consuming tasks were the hardware design verification, the software debug, as well as the hardware-software integration. So, in the 2010s, people worked on developing models to save time and save efforts by developing models of the hardware on which the software can be implemented and validated. This is what we call virtual prototyping and now what we call virtual twins. The main benefits were to implement the so-called shift-left paradigm, so enabling a concurrent development of the hardware and the software part of the system that helps to identify potential holes or ambiguities in the specification, and that helps as well to integrate and validate earlier the hardware with the software, identifying bugs earlier and enabling more deep validation activities to cover specific corner cases. Today, virtual twins are used as pre-silicon platforms and they are providing a lot of benefits to find ambiguities and contradictions in the specifications. They also enable to prototype certain aspects of the specification, in particular the behavior related to the performance or to the low power strategies. It obviously also helps to develop the embedded software and validate it by offering a large test capabilities to stress the software and the full system. So this is a good way to help maturing the software. But nowadays there are also post-silicon activities supported by virtual twins. In particular, during the bring-up period, the virtual twin is a tool to understand how the software executes on the hardware and enables also kind of joint debug activities on the hardware and on the model to locate more easily the bugs. They might also be used by the end customer for their own developments, where the users will develop their part of the embedded software running on a certain system and integrate it in a bigger system at their side. There is a certain continuum of SoC virtual twins from spec to the silicon product. From the specification, it's easy to develop SoC black box models. They are mainly service-oriented. They don't implement the internal architecture of the system, but they focus on the functionality of the SoC. Then, when the hardware and software specifications are available, then it's possible to implement an architectural model of the system on chip, usually based on the System C language, where the various components of the system on chip are accurately modeled: CPUs, hardware IPs, accelerators, and so on. So the usual technologies behind to develop these models are the System C language, now an IEEE standard, as well as the IP-Exact standards to facilitate model generation and integration. Over the time, when RTL IPs are available, it's possible to substitute the TLM model of the IP by its RTL implementation, assuming that you insert the appropriate transactors in between to manage the difference in terms of levels of abstraction. And here we talk about System C HDL co-simulation, having the main part of the system still simulated using System C, but also having the RTL IP implemented in VHDL or Verilog. Moving forward, the next step is usually to shift to hardware emulators or to prototyping boards. And here we can mix the various technologies to support System C plus HDL co-emulation, meaning that one part of the system is still simulated in System C, but a certain part of the system having its RTL available is then mapped on a hardware emulator or a prototyping board. At the end of the day, when the silicon is available, as I mentioned previously, the model can still be used for debug purposes in conjunction with real execution on the silicon. There are various categories of systems in the industry today. So a certain number of SoCs are very complex. They are processing intensive with a certain number of CPUs, GPUs, neural networks, image processing coprocessors. They embed many IOs, such as sensors for LiDAR, camera, GPS, etc. And they also support safety and security constraints, where it's very important to secure the behaviors of the system and avoid unexpected behaviors or have some corrective actions for hardware failures. So for this first category of complex SoCs, a typical architecture is like the one depicted on this slide, where you have multi-core CPUs, lots of memory, and clusters that are dedicated to certain processing activities. We can see a lot of IOs, USB, PCI Express, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, CAN, SPI, I2C, and so on and so forth. These systems are very complex. The order of magnitude is more than 20 million lines of code for the software, including operating systems, sometimes real-time operating systems. And the consequence of the hardware complexity is that the order of magnitude of the model size is about 1 million lines of code for the models themselves. Second category of well-known objects today is the smart objects, or objects that are used for the Internet of Things applications. There are many application areas, from consumer to medical, going through industrial systems. Here, a very specific feature is the importance of the connectivity, supporting Ethernet, internal buses, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, LoRa, and others. There is more and more a security concern associated to these devices, and they are obviously distributed, being sometimes operated without connection to the energy network. The low power capabilities are very important. So at the end, these systems are quite small. They are composed of small SoCs with microcontrollers or microprocessors where there are few embedded cores. There is obviously some memory. There are some hardware accelerators for such as DMA, graphics, and other dedicated blocks. There are a lot of IOs, GPIOs, I2C, SPI, and a main feature of this system is the connectivity. So the microcontroller is interacting with the rest of the world through connectivity IPs, and usually collect some data from sensors or actuators and share them through a gateway. Energy efficiency is a very high concern due to these autonomous operations of the systems. And security is obviously a concern as well, as lots of personal data might be collected from the operations of these systems. The complexity here is not on a single unit or a single node. The complexity lies into the composition of various small SoCs that interact together. So it's a kind of locally simple, globally complex system. What we observe in terms of modeling trends is that the anticipation of the functional embedded software is still a key activity, where people developing embedded software do need more diagnosis capabilities and introspection capabilities to inspect the internals of the system and better understand how the software interacts with the hardware resources of the system. Using a model, the virtual twin enables also that people can run scenarios that are difficult to test on the silicon, and they can run what they call untestable scenarios, meaning that they can set the system in a certain state and check that the software is still robust and operates correctly in these conditions. We observe that there are more and more needs to validate the dynamic power management strategies for systems, for autonomous systems. So we do not need to model only the functional behavior of the system, but we need also to model all what relates to reset, clocks, clock controllers, clock trees, to be able to capture the wake-up sequences, switch to low power modes, see how the system resumes, and make sure that the power management strategies are correctly implemented to enable such wake-up events and make sure that the system behaves correctly in response of wake-up events. Security features I mentioned is very important, but the validation and the integration of the security features is a real challenge. And offering modeling capabilities to capture security features is very important because it helps a lot to validate on the model that the security features are correctly implemented and that the system behaves correctly under security constraints. Debug and validation of these capabilities is very hard on the hardware itself, so using a model is very beneficial for that. Another trend is to validate the system of system, considering that a system itself is not only a unit or a node, but is a sensor node that is connected to the rest of the system being composed of tens to thousands of nodes, and having the capability to develop a model of the full system with so many nodes is very useful because you cannot do that at the lab level, And when you wait the deployment on the field, then it's usually too late to discover that the system doesn't scale. At the end, the last trend we observe for a couple of years is that there is a unification of the physical and virtual devices, where a system will mix actual devices running on the silicon, but also virtual twins, to be able to address parts that are not available yet in terms of silicon products, or even to be able to assess scenarios where you scale up and you change on the field dynamically some systems using components or new sources of components. I will now give two examples of such virtual twin models. So the first one is a Bluetooth low energy device, where we have developed a model of a system composed of two nodes that interact through a Bluetooth channel that has been modeled. Each of the nodes is composed of an STM32 microcontroller that interacts with a Bluetooth connectivity IP and that interacts with its environment through buttons and LEDs. So the scenario here is that when you push the button on node 0, then it will set the light on node 1, the command going through the Bluetooth connection that is modeled as part of the system. To go more into the details of a virtual twin of the node, so we have implemented a model of the STM32 subsystem, where we have actually so the Cortex M4 model that is implemented with the various peripheral models that are needed to execute correctly the software running on the ARM core. So here we have implemented what is needed for this application. We did not go into an exhaustive model of the microcontroller, but we wanted to assess what is needed, what can be modeled partially, and what does not need to be actually modeled for this specific application. For the connectivity part, we also implemented all what relates to the Bluetooth Low Energy Protocol interface, state machines, and we were able to have an abstract representation of the Bluetooth protocol itself to exchange commands between the two nodes. The benefits of such model is that they are early available. We decided to have a selective approach to implement the models of the microcontroller, so the modeling effort was quite reasonable. And we were able to assess the scalability of the model to execute a platform with a certain number of nodes that represent the actual application system. In terms of software bug and software validation, we were able also to identify some corner cases related to clock controller setup, where the software was not providing the right values to the registers, and it was quite easy to debug and fix these issues. A second example is about a model of a sensor node for a critical water management infrastructure. So this work has been done in the context of the Brain IoT cooperative project. And here we are working on a sensor node that is collecting data from the field related to water management systems. So we have a certain information for gates where we collect the information associated to the flow of the water that is measured by the sensors. The microcontroller is computing some data and sends the data to the connectivity IP to be then gathered by the system. So the benefits of developing models for such system is that we do not have the constraints of the physical devices. So Obviously, it's far more easy to validate the software on a model compared to deploying a microcontroller in the field, implementing the system in a dam, for instance, to collect the data. So it's much easier. It's easy to manage complexity, and it offers a very large flexibility to assess scenarios, and this helps to increase the productivity of the system developer. In terms of reliability, these critical applications require also to make sure that we can assess all the scenarios, so we can put the system in a lots of different states and assess the robustness of the system with regard to the scenarios that might be difficult to reproduce in the field. Here we have developed two flavors of the models. A first flavor is a black box model, where we do not capture the internal architecture of the sensor node, but we just represent the services that are offered by the sensor node. We abstract the embedded software, we abstract the hardware implementation of the sensor node, but we basically just ensure that the functionality of the sensor node is implemented, taking the values of the sensors as a file and generating the data to the gateway. This model acts as a functional contract of the sensor node specification. The second flavor of the virtual twin is here a System C model that represents accurately the architecture of the sensor node, where we have actually modeled the sensor with the various registers, the way it interacts through an I2C bus to the microcontroller. We have implemented a model of the microcontroller. All the registers are captured in the model, and the connectivity IP is accurately modeled as well to support its triggering by the embedded software running on the microcontroller. So in this case, the embedded software is actually running on the STM32 model. It uses the hardware abstraction layer as on the real silicon. It collects the data from the sensor model through the I2C bus, and it programs the connectivity IP to issue the communication. We do have a software debugger connected to the model of the STM32 microcontroller, so that enables software developers to run debug sessions on the embedded software and validate the embedded software for the application as they would do on the real silicon. However, at the boundaries of the model, this model is still conforming to the functional contract of the black box model that was developed previously. So we can seamlessly switch from one model to the other and validate that the system still behaves correctly. So the various details of the STM32 internals have been modeled to support the development of the application firmware. What are the challenges ahead? So first, developing models at the SoC level is now no longer enough. If we consider the automotive area, the system is not an SoC, it's even not an ECU, it's the full car. And the system is a big network. It embeds various protocols such as CAN, LIN, FlexRay, Ethernet, and others. And the components are developed by various companies, are integrated by the tier one or even by the car makers. And these guys need to have models that can interact together. While the protocols in the reality are quite well standardized, there is at this point in time no standard in terms of models to support such communication. So interoperability for virtual twins integration is still a concern today. And there are a certain number of initiatives to drive standardization. but we can observe that there is still lots to do in that area today. People are developing more and more models. These models might be in different technical states in terms of operating systems, compilers, simulation kernels. They are integrating heterogeneous domains, mainly digital, but also IMS or multiphysics, which makes the integration of all these modeling elements quite complex and quite hard to actually get up and running. There might be also some constraints related to requirements by the end customer, where these customers might want to replace a model by another, or might want to customize a specific part of a system. So it's very difficult, and it's no longer appropriate to deliver a monolithic executable that embeds all the parts of the system. The idea is more to run separate simulations for parts of the systems and have them integrated and interacting through interfaces that enables a correct execution of the complete system while the various subparts are running as separate simulations. However, there are several challenges associated to that in terms of performance, in terms of semantics, in terms of exploitation of multi-core machines that are available today, where the simulation is usually not taking benefit of the workstation architecture. We need also to consider the integration of virtual twins at various levels, from system of systems down to the SoC level. So we need to manage several levels of abstraction. We need to guarantee that the overall simulation speed will be acceptable for the end user. These various levels of abstraction require also to ensure functional equivalence of models at various levels of abstraction. And we need also to consider the modeling costs, and people need to have sometimes detailed models, sometimes abstract models, so we need also to mitigate the modeling cost for a certain system. At the end, this means that we need to ensure an easy integration, a substitution of twins at the various levels of abstraction, but doing that seamlessly, which means that we need to identify a way to guarantee interfaces interoperability, and we need also to have a way to integrate seamlessly heterogeneous modeling languages and frameworks. To conclude, usage of virtual twins today is quite well known. They are used for different categories of circuits, sometimes for complex SoCs, sometimes for smart objects. We see a certain number of trends and benefits for using virtual twins. Embedded software can be validated early, as well as power management strategies. Using virtual twins helps to set the system in some states that are difficult to test, and so untestable scenarios can be executed on virtual twins, which is usually not the case on the real silicon. It's easy to integrate security features and support debug and validation of security features. We can address connectivity concern, and we can have a scalable validation of the system or of the system of systems. A large trend today is also the unification of physical and virtual devices to be able to assess the complexity and assess the full operation of a system with various parts that might have a different state of maturity in the design flow. There are still a lot of upcoming challenges. We need to expand to the next level. We need to address heterogeneous model integration, as well as manage multi-abstraction twins throughout the value chain, from the silicon developers up to the end user. Thank you for your attention.